stuff. It's a very, very charming little village. This 100% Pinot Noir aged for about 40 months, as it says on the paper. It has so I don't know how to really start this.
Let's tell everybody what dosage is.
Yeah, so the dosage, exactly. So when all the sugar are actually transformed into alcohol at the end, and when the champagne is ready to be drunk, the dosage is the final touch of adding the sweetness to the champagne. Okay, and when you don't add anything, that there's no added sweetener, right? So that's pretty much. So what is a dosage? So it used with the liqueur de dosage. So it's made with sugar and old wine, and that is the tiny little portion added at the end just before we put the cork. Okay, so this is what dosage is in the water, and so this Blanc de Noir has no sugar added, so it's called no dosage, zero dosage. It's also another word, and so voila. So this is going to be
but it will still have fruitiness.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. You're going to have the fruitiness. This is Pinot Noir, so it is going to be very fruity. It's going to be pretty light. It should be, and it's also going to be yep, fruity, but also pretty fresh and light is really what I noticed with this particular champagne. And I think as we go to the tasting, our palate is gonna discover some more deeper champagne. So this is a special style. It's on purpose, and it's that's how.
In my experience,
like
it seems like there are more zero dosage wines available now. Is that a trend?
It could be a trend, yeah.
Yeah.
Could be a trend. It's a trend. Another trend too is to do what we call parcellaire. And so it's like you take one plot, and you do you make the champagne from that little plot. And yeah, Brut Nature can be a trend.
I wasn't going to jump in at this point, but I'm going to, because I wanted to talk about global warming. Is that affecting champagne? And are we getting riper grapes, fruitier wines, and therefore you don't need as much dosage? Is that valid?
I wouldn't really say that because when you go to...
You mean I'm wrong?
No. I'm sorry. I want to stay here. No, but with the climate change, there is definitely something, but the harvest usually starts a little bit sooner. At the end, you want to pick the grapes when it's the maturity of the grapes achieve about 10 degrees of alcohol.
Right.
And so if it's going to be a warm harvest, this is going to be earlier. Okay. And then we're going to be picking the grapes end of August, which is pretty early, sometimes mid-August for the last few years.
Okay.
And it can go, sometimes you pick up grapes in late September, October.
Okay.
Last year, it was mid-October. This year was mid-September. And a couple of years ago, it was as early as mid-August, which for French people was horrible because it was right in the middle of their vacation. To stop everything and go and pick up the grapes.
All right. So despite the harvest conditions, even if it's a hot year, you're just going to harvest earlier so you get the alcohol you want.
There's this adjustment, based on the mother nature.
Oh, very good. So other things about this wine: 35-year-old wines.
Yes, that's
stainless steel fermentation.
Yes.
And the malolactic is now most champagne, the majority of champagne goes through the malolactic fermentation. You know what that is? Should we explain it? It's a conversion from malic acid, the sharp green acid as in apples, to lactic acid, as you think of milk. So it's a reduction of the acidity and a reduction of the sharpness of wine. Because if you were to do most non-mallow wines, like Gosset, I'll let you talk about it.
Typically higher acidity and kind of more minerality. Malolactic acid, that process is going to give wine oftentimes like their buttery or brioche kind of notes. And wines that don't undergo that process will have higher acid typically and higher minerality.
Yeah. Okay, so that'll be a style element. Your
Mhm.
question.
Yes, I mean, this one is clearly like relatively bright then for something that would accomplish the buttering process, so.
Yeah.
Presumably if it didn't, it would have.
Yeah, and it did, and we went through the malolactic, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, Jade? Jade, Jade? Can we pour the next wine? Oh, comments about the Alexandra Sainz.
So pretty, like I just had a taste, this to me is really like, this is as natural as you can get a champagne, like literally.
Mhm.
It's a pretty straightforward champagne.
And that the measure as no added sweetness at the end. And there is a chart, did I put that in here, where you measure the amount of sweetness? Do I have it here?
I thought it was more towards the front. It's the grams.
It's on the second page. Oh, it's on the second page. There you go. Okay.
And brut nature means naturally dry, right? Like that's the.
Yes.
No, that's not.
Yes.
What is that?
Right.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, on here with champagne dosage. Liqueur d'exposition. The final amount of sweetened wine that they're adding to finish the wine where they want it to be. The brut nature, no added sugar and under 3 grams of residual.
Mhm. Yep.
Okay.
In this particular case, there is absolutely none, 0.
Oh, there we go. Wine number 2 is the Colcombet Brut.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh, it's just,
Some of you got the vintage in your glass.
Ooh,
Okay, just okay.
lucky.
Pretty quick.
You want to grab it?
It's gonna be the same, so
wanna
this is
grab
interesting,
their
because, well,
glasses
we'll
back
talk
there?
about it, but
It'll
try
be
to
fine.
remember the difference between the two.
Okay, all right.
That's gonna be a completely different thing.
All right, so that's the second thing that
all right.
went
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's it.
oh, yeah, in their case, it went right.
Easy,
Brut éclat.
easy
Brut
fix.
éclat.
I do want to also add, while we wait for the next pouring, that, and again, as I'm tasting it really, the secret of champagne is that it's called the assemblage. So you blend the cepage, you blend the years, you wait, minimum is 15 months, but you can wait 10 years before you drink the champagne. You do the malolactic or you don't. You add some sweet or you don't. So there's thousands way of making champagne. And so this particularly, and I do want to insist a little bit on this wine, is because this Pinot Noir, you taste the fruitiness, and it's very different than the Pinot Noir that you're going to be tasting coming from another village, like Bouzy, which is another village, or like Ambonnet, or there's, like Verzy, Verzenay, there's different terroir, really, and it's makes a big difference.
For neatness, although this isn't always so clearly defined, you have the Montagne de Reims, and it's primarily black grapes, Pinot Noir. You have the Val de Marne, the transverse valley, which is primarily Pinot Meunier. And then you have the Côte de Blanc, a little bit to the south, primarily Chardonnay. But every region has the other grapes planted, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, Chardonnay. And there are other minor grape varieties that nobody talks about, but there are other obscure little varieties. Question?
Yeah, so I'm reading 40 months on the leaves.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking leaves is everything that's left, all the skins and whatnot, but you're not going to color. Am I misinterpreting the use of this lees versus?
So compare what we call on lees, it's actually in the bottle already, and it's after the first fermentation. So when you pick the grapes, you're right, the Pinot Noir is a red grape, and if you let it sit, it's going to become a little bit reddish, and then you can make your rosé with this, or same with the Pinot Meunier. And then what happened is, then we go to the malolactic fermentation. Then we call the tirage. So we're gonna, from the cube, take the wine and put it in bottles, okay? And that aging is what we call aging on lees. And the minimum is 15 months in Champagne. That's by law, you cannot release a champagne sooner than 15-month aging.
Thank you.
Warren, let's start talking about the first.
Can you show
today,
the
the group
camera
éclat.
the label?
Sure. Do we
Please.
want to talk a little bit about the background of the winery?
Please,
So-
give us a thumbnail sketch.
So interesting, Colcombet, as you had mentioned, Frank, new to California. A friend of mine got married earlier this year in France and needed a champagne for his wedding. And this champagne was provided. And then he went to the champagne house and said, how do I buy it in the United States? And said, well, you can't. Call this guy. And was introduced to Henri Colcombet, I was. And we negotiated a deal just a couple months ago and brought out a pallet of the wine. And as you're about to discover, I think it's extraordinary. We don't represent, a lot of wines from a wholesale standpoint, but this is one of them. And it's a really interesting story. Henri Colcombet's family was in the silk ribbon, silk fabric business in Lyon, going back almost 100 years. And they sold to Chanel and Yves Saint Laurent and Hermes, and ultimately sold the business to Hermes. And Henri worked for LVMH for a long time, the huge house that makes all kinds of, luxury goods and champagnes and other wines. And also co-founded Tesseron Cognac with Alfred Tesseron, renowned for Pontet Canet in Bordeaux. And he was going to all these events and parties. It's like, I don't like the champagne they serve. So he decided as a new venture in life that he wanted to find a champagne that suited his palate and his taste, particularly for an aperitif style wine. So you go to a reception and you get a glass of wine to start. And look, I think Brut Nature is fantastic. I'm a low dosage guy. I love it. I think, Alexandra, your champagne, they're a fantastic champagne. But it can sometimes, for most people, be a little hard with no dosage, etc. This particular wine, this Brut Éclat, the first Colcombet wine we're going to have today, is a traditional blend. So the three grapes, as Alexandra mentioned, are Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier, are the grapes that go into Champagne in one various form or another, 100% or a blend. This is a traditional blend. It's got all of those three grapes, but interestingly, it's equal parts of all three. 33, 33, 33, well, actually 34, because 333 would be 99. And we don't want to cheat people by only giving them 99% of the bulk. But so it's a 34% Chardonnay. And Pinot Meunier is usually a grape that is added into blends of Champagne in small quantities, 5%, 10%. The fact that this is a third Pinot Meunier is very different. But it also gives it lively expression, because Pinot Meunier does in Champagne, to the extent what Merlot does in Bordeaux, gives it a little bit of fruit expression and liveliness and sweetness that's a little bit different from and embracing strength to a certain extent. And so this wine, unlike the zero dosage, has a 9 grams per liter of dosage, so quite high. However, still a lot of brightness and acidity. And between sweetness and acidity, that's the balance you get. That gives you that linearity of crispness and brightness, and wet slate or green apple is a very typical expression of acidity in Champagne. So and that's what we have here. 36 months on the lees. And interesting, one thing we may talk about a little bit more is what makes Champagne so consistent year over year over year is the fact that they reserve wines from previous vintages. So in this particular case, the reserve wine is 35%, which means 35% of this wine comes from vintages harvested other than in 2019, which was 3 years ago. And that way, the winemaker in Champagne is able to consistently deliver a similar flavor profile and a similar quality of wine year after year after year. Whereas in Burgundy or Bordeaux, the difference between one vintage to another could be the difference between a $200 bottle of wine and a $2,000 bottle of wine, because there's such huge variation. So what they do in Champagne in blending the wine would get you thrown in jail in Bordeaux. So that's the Brut Éclat from Colcombet. I hope you like it. The other thing that's really nice about champagne, I think Frank, you mentioned it earlier, or someone had mentioned it earlier, is the level of alcohol tends to be much lower. And you want to pick it around 10% projected or potential alcohol. These wines run 12.1. This particular wine, only 12.1% alcohol, which means you can drink more before you get arrested for driving on the wrong side of the road. But that's the Brut Éclat.
And the Brut designation is a pretty wide range, is it not?
Yes, it is. And that's the crazy thing about champagne, if you look on page 2, when they say extra Brut, which to a normal person would mean more dry, it's actually a lot more sweet. So
I'll add something on this because the trend, talking about trend, another trend is Brut Nature, that lower dosage is the trend, no dosage, but the lower dosage is the trend. When I was growing up, the champagne, they were sometimes 12 grams per liter. It was much sweeter, and that was what everybody was doing. And so gradually, there's less. The trend is also to get lower dosage.
So lower alcohol, more sweetness makes for a great aperitif wine. A wine you can just sit down and drink instead of a cocktail. And I think that the wine is lovely, but on the other hand, still works very, very well with food because it's got that balance of acid and sweetness that works with a multitude with oysters. I think there's oysters back there, right?
Eventually.
Sorry, guys at home, you don't get the oysters, but
Question.
we'll eat your share.
What the experts say, non-vintage still means that the wine is going to change and improve or evolve over time. So when I get a non-vintage sparkling or champagne, I write when I got it, and I like to hold it a year or two to let it develop further. How do you non-vintage? That could have been used 10 years ago or a year ago. How do you guys?
Well, they do. I mean,
You know what you're buying.
well, as you'll see on the sheet here, this is the base vintage of this is 2019. So most of the grapes were picked in 2019, and then 35%. So there's 65% of 2019 grapes in this bottle, and 35% of grapes from 2018, 2017, 2016. So you get that concept. But you're absolutely right. Non-vintage champagne will age and can age very, very well. I happen to be a big fan of aged champagne. All right. And my desert island wine's a 1990 wine. You open it now and it doesn't have the bubbleness and the effervescence, but it's almost like great white Burgundy at that point. The difference between vintage and non-vintage is just it's designated. Some years are just greater than others, and they put 100% of that year's harvest into that particular bottle. But they don't do that every year, only in the great, only although there's more of a trend now to do vintage champagne every year because it's a good way to make money. But look for vintage champagne from great 2008. Try find 2008 is sort of in the market now. They've been releasing the 2008s a lot, which is a phenomenal vintage. 1990, phenomenal. If you like old champagne.
And another thing, sometimes, and I love this, is the producers will put that information on the back label. Yeah, either put it on the label or you can find it online. And this is a little bit more arcane. There are codes, sometimes codes that you and I can't decipher. But as someone who worked for the company, I might be able to tell you when it was disgorged, so you can judge its age. But that was a really good question.
Usually, you want to keep in mind that when the champagne is released, it's pretty much ready to be enjoyed. So the winemaker, the house will age the wine for us, for our pleasure. So once it's released, you can still keep it, of course, but usually you probably want to enjoy it within the next 2 to 3 years after acquiring the champagne.
Comments on this wine? Thumbs up? This is really lovely. It's really bright and really fresh. And I'll put this out there, and for what it's worth, they talk about the 3 main grape varieties and what each contributes to the blend. So Pinot Noir is what exactly? Body?
Yeah, I think body and fruit,
Body and fruit.
as we saw in that, and as we'll see in rosé.
Chardonnay is maybe the lighter elements, the aroma, the bouquet, the brightness, and Pinot Meunier. Pinot Meunier is
Pinot Meunier is going to be round.
round,
The
the roundness.
Like you did the Merlot.
More like Merlot to
Yeah.
Bordeaux.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the Chardonnay is what's going to give you that linearity, that crispness,
Mhm.
you know, that beautiful mouthfeel with the little bubbles that counteracts really, really well with shellfish, for example.
Right. So if you like a broader, more mouth-filling style of champagne, you might opt for those that have more Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier. If you want the brightness and the, you know, the salinity and the linear, what do you say, linear?
Linearity.
Linearity, is that a word?
That's right.
Okay, you go for a Blanc de Blanc. And I know that that's the style that I like, but I sacrificed, there are 2 Blanc de Blancs in the walk-around tasting. There's not going to be a Blanc de Blanc here. I sacrificed my personal likes for yours. And you'll notice too in the walk around tasting, and there are 2 Blanc de Blancs and 4 rosés. And rosé seems to be
Trying to.
being more and more accepted. You know, I think in our case, you think rosé, you think of cold duck, you know, the cheap pink.
Oh,
But fortunately, that's behind us now. And rosé
I think we have
spectacular.
we have a couple of bonus ones, actually.
Oh,
The
good.
rosé of Pinot and Pinot Noir, actually.
Very good. So now, does everybody have the new wine? Jade, are we done? Okay. Matthew, you're on.
I'm ready. So we are now going to have Champagne Gosset. These guys are going to be the oldest wine house in Champagne, with almost 500 years of history, and they're still family owned. The Champagne, as we mentioned earlier, does not go through malolactic fermentation, nor does it see any type of oak treatment. Everything's going to be done in stainless. So once again, you know, little higher minerality, higher acid typically. But yeah, this is going to be the Grand Reserve Brut, which is 45% Chardonnay, 45% Pinot Noir, and 10% Pinot Meunier. These guys only own about a hectare of property at the winery in Aix. And then they source from over 200 different growers. So coming from Aix, Bouzy, Embonnet, Mesnil-sur-Oger as well. 36 months in bottle here, or I'm sorry, it's 36 months on the lees, 6 months in bottle, and 8 grams per liter dosage here.
Talking
And-
about villages.
Yeah, well, and I wanted to also add on to what you just said. When you mentioned that Gosset is also sourcing, you know, their some of their grapes, and something that people might not know, but there is a very, very high level chart. So when Gosset accept the grapes from you know, one grower that don't make the champagne but just cultivate the grapes, it will have to go through that 10 degree of acidity, the health of the grapes. I mean, it's going to go through some quality charts, and for Gosset, but for everyone who sourced the grapes. So just wanted to add this little note on
Sure.
the champagne.
My question to you, the panelists, is Premier Cru and Grand Cru. I mean, what does the consumer glean from that? Are they appreciably different?
I think it depends, because so much of it is winemaking today, and there's so much intervention that can happen, and we try to get as little intervention, which is why we like grower champagnes or a famous brand like Gosset. But Gosset is also somewhat restrained in terms of the winemaking style, as opposed to like a huge house like a Veuve Clicquot, you know, or a Laurent Perrier. Laurent Perrier makes 10 million bottles. They just launched a couple of years ago a $100 million ad campaign. So $10 a bottle is going to Morgan Freeman. So, you know, as opposed to what's actually in the bottle, right? So that's the thing. So from my standpoint, Frank, is try the wine, and if you like it, does it really matter? However, there is, you know, what you get from the terroir, what you get from the climat, what actually the grapes are actually harvested and where they're from, and how much fruit is on the vine. So there is a discernible difference, because that goes into how the grapes evolve and develop. So Premier Cru and Grand Cru make the quality of the fruit is materially and discernibly different, particularly to someone who knows what they're doing
the
in the
flavor.
wine and flavor.
Right.
Yeah,
So
the flavor.
now, obviously, with quality, there's a discernible difference in price as well. So you have to make that value judgment
Right.
in drinking, just fruit that from a grower that's not with a vineyard that's not designated as Premier or Grand Cru. But the really famous small production like Colcombet, where a couple of brands make some of the most coveted champagnes in the world, that go for thousands of dollars a bottle, is considered the greatest vineyard among cognoscenti in all of Champagne. But does that mean for all of us as we drink wine that a $2,000 bottle of champagne is going to give you meaningfully more pleasure than a $50 bottle of champagne? Well, that's a value judgment you have to provide, and it depends on your bank account. But if someone's paying for it, I'm drinking Grand Cru champagne.
A question for all the panelists. What do you see happening with prices in the next year or two? An easy answer.
I mean, have you ever seen prices go down?
No.
So, I mean, the challenge, I think, is to find value. Is to find value. So there are certain famous brands, Gosset being one, that I think still delivers value. There are other famous brands, yellow neoprene sleeves that don't really deliver in my personal opinion. But I think there are a lot of wines that are still more accessible from a price standpoint than they ever used to be. But it takes work to go and find them. I had to have a friend get married in France to discover them. Otherwise, how would I find? So it takes work.
Now, comments on this, Gosset? Comments or questions? I find it really full, really luscious, really rounded.
Terrific
Very
wine.
round and
Yeah.
very,
Terrific.
very
And
easy
even
to
though the-
drink.
Even though the dosage is very similar to the Colcombet.
Yeah, but this, and
quite
Frank,
different.
this, as I was mentioning, this is a more typical blend. If you look, I think the Pinot Meunier is 10% in this. So this is going to be a profile that is more typical of a brut champagne, and it's there's a reason this is one of the most famous and venerable champagne houses in the world. The wine's extraordinary.
Very
And
good.
talking about production as well on that, these guys produce about 1 million bottles total production. So not a huge, in the grand scheme of things.
How many do you produce?
Oh,
5,000?
so, yeah, max.
1,500, right?
Yeah, same thing here.
But but a million bottle with that consistency is phenomenal. I can also say that. I mean, there's so much, work behind that to bring that consistency on this bottle.
Don't know, million versus, so that orange label thing.
40 million plus globally.
I just had no concept of what that meant.
Gosset says that you'll never see their wines coming from their importers in supermarkets. So, just to kind of, and yet Yellow Label is everywhere. You can buy it usually at a Texaco or something like that.
Yeah, they have a huge marketing budget and it's everywhere. All right, very good.
But actually, it brings up the question because, correct me if I'm wrong, but Gosset doesn't own enough vines to produce 1 million bottles of
Correct.
wine. They're buying
Sourcing
wines.
fruit from.
So that was Champagne. All the big houses would buy grapes from smaller farmers. The trend for these types of wines, where the growers of the grapes who would sell them to the main houses began making wine themselves. So like, why should we get 12 cents for this much juice when we can get, where they can get $50 a bottle, for example. So there's this trend over the, 10, 15 years or so with growers champagne for those folks who own the vineyards to bottle their own, a percentage of their own production of fruit and market it under their house brand, as opposed to selling it wholesale to other producers. And I think that's what. But Gosset, obviously, going back several hundred years, is able to source the best fruit from the best growers because of relationships. I would think, correct?
500 years of relationships.
Yes. Well, we're going to go back to Alexandra for her second wine, the 2014 Millésime. Take it away.
Yep. So
What was the vintage like? Was it?
it was a good vintage.
Oh wow, this is
Just like the 2013.
oh, this is good.
And just like every year, when you take care of your good grape and Mother Nature, gives you some, good,
This is good.
This is a very old vintage, 10 years old. It's obviously, we're talking about Grand Cru and different village, different boozy. So this is gonna be more robust, more earthy than this guy, and closer to probably what we drank from Gosset. And again, we're talking about the terroir here. So when we talk Grand Cru, First Cru, or other cru, there is a reason why it's classified Grand Cru and why Gosset or this particular wine has that special profile and flavor. They are gonna be much more typical. So typical meaning, you're gonna taste that in boozy, which is mainly Pinot Noir in the Montagne de Reims. It's gonna be more earthy. So you're gonna get, the fruit, of course, of the Pinot Noir, but it's gonna be a little bit more earthy. If you go to the Côte des Blancs, which we don't have today, but it's gonna be lighter, a little bit more brioche, a little bit more, a little bit lighter. So this type of wine is supposed to be a little bit heavier in that sense. And definitely the aging is also contributing to the robust.
So it has more concentration
Yes.
and length, even though it's still young and vibrant.
I think it answers
this
your
is
question
80.
of why Grand Cru gets that designation.
And so this is 80% Pinot Noir, and this is about 20% Chardonnay. Just like earlier, it's like 80-20, that's the approximate ratio, but those are the 5 plots in Bouzy, and 4 of them are planted with Pinot Noir, 1 of them is planted with Chardonnay. So.
But deciding to make a vintage champagne is an entirely independent
Yes, so
decision,
when
correct?
you make vintage, it's because you're lucky enough to have a great quality grapes at the time of harvest. Healthy, plenty of sugar, acidity, and so that will make your decision of whether or not you want to have a vintage.
So it's not as though there's in port, there's a declaration.
No,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it's really up to the winemaker, to the house, to decide whether or not they're going to make. Unfortunately, when you go just in the village in one place, you can have in March, for instance, when there's frost, that frost that kills the little
Buds.
the buds. One plot can be frozen and dead, and the other one can be still, alive and flourishing.
Right.
So it's really up to the winemaker to, at the time of harvest, to see what he has in his stump and decide on what to do with it. Same goes with in Champagne. You have some Coteau Champenois. It's a red wine, and usually also there's still wine made from Pinot Noir most of the time. It's also based on if the year is good and if they're gonna be able to make some. Red
So
wine.
and you have, I wrote down anyway, 6 grams per liter for dosage.
Yes.
Do you go through a taste test and decide here's 6, here's 7, here's 8, here's 9?
When you pick up when you taste the wine, it's not really, it's also a taste. It's a question of taste, and imagine how the wine is going to evaluate. The older the wine is, the less dosage it needs. Okay, in general. So you don't want to, bombard this old wine with,
Right.
Because
you've masked the complexity of the aged wine.
Exactly.
And when was this disgorged, the 2014?
So this particular wine was disgorged. It's not written on the label, but it was disgorged last April.
Sorry.
Last April.
So it's been on the lees for
But
10, almost 9 years?
yeah.
Okay.
And then you do have, after you disgorge, so if you want to talk about disgorging, you always want a wine to, when you add that little sweetness on it, you want to wait maybe a couple of months for the wine, all that sweetness of sugar or dosage liquor to settle. And
So anywhere from a couple of
really-
months to maybe 6 months,
blend with
resting in bottle before it's it's released.
Yep.
Okay. Comments on this wine? Question?
Yeah.
Last.
Mhm. Mhm.
Was that an 11? Or how was it?
The two, it was a 2013. And to compare, this is much more broad and fruity to my mind. That 2013 to me was still very crisp and very fresh, with great capacity to age in the bottle. This one, just enjoy it. You know, it's good. It's an old vintage, and you can taste, you know, I mean, and I'm curious, actually, do you know the aging of the Gosset? Because I found them.
The base wine,
Mm-hmm.
I believe
The
it's 15.
15.
On the
Yeah.
non-vintage brut?
Yeah.
The base wine is 2015. Okay. Was there another question over here about
Yeah, I think so.
the millesime?
Oh,
You have a question? Yeah.
Zach.
You kind of just commented a little bit on how your 13 fit model, not like it's 14, it's more drink down. So vintage to vintage can lay down way differently for each spend.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For the fun, but I think, you know, we want to get, because we can go on with that, but we would have tasted the 13 and the 14 next to each other. You would have, this one is a little bit more fruity, and the other one, it was a little bit more crisp and more minimal. Yeah. And it's the same plots, the same vineyards, the same way of making wine, same winemaking style. It's just the year. And yeah, I guess it's really the year that harvest. The harvest brought us. Yeah. Yeah.
And you store champagne bottles as you would any, good wine on its side in a nice, cool, dark place.
And you
we've
can taste on the nose here a little bit of a more vinous, you know, it's a little bit vinous.
We tasted the 2013 recently, and it's just spectacular. It still has this great lineage.
Finish, yeah.
Linearity.
I can't say that word.
Are there any questions? Any questions from the folks online?
Teddy?
No question.
Okay.
Oh, they're
Good.
sitting at home. We get a little taste. They drained the whole bottle. They're like fast asleep already. So anyway, I think you all now have in your glass
with
the Colcombet Brut Sabré.
And I'm going to say that this would be my entry as a Blanc Noir, even though it doesn't say that. But go ahead.
Can I have a sip?
Oh yeah, Alexandra needs
Sorry, I was
the second Colcombet.
talking and not drinking enough.
Okay.
You're enjoying.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt, Warren. Go ahead.
No. So this wine is again quite distinctive. It's a Blanc de Noir. Obviously, you can see it looks like it's a white wine. So obviously no skin contact, because that's what brings the color into red wine. All the pre-run juice from a Pinot Noir or a Pinot Meunier grape is going to run clear. This is very interesting because it gets 80% Pinot Noir and 20% Pinot Meunier. Usually Blanc de Noirs would quite often be 100% Pinot Noir or 100% Pinot Meunier, which is also fantastic. If you ever find 100% Pinot Meunier, jump on it. Very rare, not ubiquitously found, but the wine is superb. So this one is 80-20, very similar. This is 24 months on the lees versus 36 on the previous wine. 9 grams per liter dosage, so a little higher. But again, just another wine, also only around 12% alcohol, but a wine that just as well, a lot of fruit, a lot of red fruits. So generally in Pinot Noir, you'll get raspberry, strawberry, maybe to a certain extent like a Bing cherry, perhaps in terms of flavors in Pinot Noir in general and in Pinot Noir driven champagnes as well, as opposed to black fruit, blackberries and those kinds of fruits that are more distinctive in red wine. In claret from Bordeaux, for example. So again, a wine that is superb in and of itself to drink as an aperitif, but this is a really, really good food wine because it's coming from Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier, so red grapes. So everyone says, don't drink white wine with meat or red wine with poultry. It's like, I don't buy any of that stuff. But if you are ever confused about what to pair with food, pair it with champagne. Champagne is probably the greatest wine to go with food. This wine will be fantastic with shellfish and oysters, but this wine would be phenomenal with truffle pasta.
This also has a good percentage of reserve wine. I want to ask the panelists, how is reserve wine kept? I mean, in tank and barrel?
And it depends on the winemaker. It could be in
Right.
barrel. We
Right.
do it in cubes.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Do it.
In cubes. Thanks.
Oh,
In
Yeah,
tank.
yeah, sorry.
Okay.
It's my accent.
Most
But some people
wineries
put it in
today, modern techniques would, they're in steel tank, probably, because you can also maintain temperature to 1/10 of a degree now with technology and stuff. So it can really preserve the integrity of that wine for years. And so some producers will hold wine in tanks for years. There is a producer, an Italian producer, Brandon knows these guys, up in the Alta Adige in the north of Italy, that will keep white wine in steel tank for decades. They have some Pinot Bianco that they put in steel tank in 1979 that will only be removed in 2026 and then go in German oak barrels for 2 years and then released to the market in 2029. Now, I know this winery, but I know this for a fact because a friend of mine and a client went to that winery and saw it in the tank and has made an appointment to go back in 2029 to get the first bottle. So, you can keep wine in pristine conditions with today's technology, unlike they'd ever been able to do. I mean, 100 years ago, they would keep the reserve wine in a wood barrel. And I doubt whether the consistency and quality would be the same as it is in the modern
You also see a
world.
term now used, reserve wine in a Solera system,
Mhm.
where they're constantly replenishing these older reserve wines with young wine as they draw off to.
In Champagne?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
They-
Oh, I was not aware of that.
Yeah, right.
See, you learn something new every day.
It's the world of wine.
So much for being an expert.
Well.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so yeah, we're going to do
Okay.
this wine. So what I asked was, I asked for an unopened bottle of champagne, because what I've seen happen a lot is when people open champagne and they pop the cork and all the bubbles go on the floor. Well, the winemaker spend years, sometimes 10 years, putting the bubbles in the bottle. You don't want them going everywhere. And then I was at a wedding with my wife, Connie. Connie's in the back. Hi, honey. I went to the bar and the young woman who was the bartender was like holding it here. And it's like, oh my God, you're too pretty to knock your teeth out at age 19. But so the trick is, and of course, saboring's the best, right? Saboring's really cool, but it's all dangerous. Yeah. Does everyone know? Because it's the same for every bottle of champagne. How many times I have to twist this? 6? I don't know. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and a half.
Wow.
Okay. Now,
And I didn't even know that. I just learned something
Right.
today.
every single one of them, right? So now the thing is, I do this a little differently because there's 6 atmospheres of pressure in this bottle. I mean, I'm not a scientist. That's a lot, right? This is 1 atmosphere, right? So what I like to do, I like to keep what's the French word for the cage?
A muesli.
The muesli. Okay. Second thing I learned today is I like to
Say it before you can open it.
muesli.
Bravo. Now you may. Now you may.
So I keep that untwisted portion between my fingers. So now even if it inadvertently explodes because of the pressure, it's still not going anywhere. I might knock myself out with the recoil. And then the trick is you turn the bottle, not the cork. So now you're holding it. And then you got to loosen it just a little bit here.
Sometimes they're really tight.
And then you want to be you want to listen for that nun's fart. Did you hear that? So that's how you open a bottle of champagne.
Thank you.
And then the really cool thing is then if you take it out while we're pouring that and you take out the cork, now you've got this really cool thing. Well, you go like, I don't know how you go.
Are you going to share?
Yeah, how do you
I don't know.
you can make
before and it
Yeah,
really messes
yeah.
up your fingers.
Make a table.
Yeah, I'll do it. You got to turn it inside, but it makes like a really cool chair. So if you're tired of spending $100 for little chairs at the American Girl doll store, you can sort of do it with one of these.
We'll make a lot of chairs later as an activity.
Yeah.
It's for sale at the end of the day. It goes in auction.
And chatting about champagne too, you know, like, oftentimes I think people are
Oh, no.
a little apprehensive,
Gotta
like,
keep up.
or like, you know, like with like price to quality kind of is sometimes an issue. Like people are afraid to spend money on champagne, but you know, the amount of love and time and dedication that goes into making these bottles of wine is huge. You know, Alex aged that bottle of wine for 12 years.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, it's incredible. There is an aging process here that you don't find
she's a 2.
other than champagne. Thank you for.
Okay. Okay, now, Matthew, bring it on home.
Grand Rosé Brut here for you guys. So I did a little bit of recon on the internet and through the Wilson Daniels website, and I found out that this particular blend is actually going to be 37% Pinot Noir, 55% Chardonnay, and then there's 8% Pinot Noir that they use for the red wine to make it rosé.
Ah, okay.
Also sourcing from Embonnet, I Bouzy, 36 months on lease here.
And those are all the same profile, probably as Gosset, probably as this. It is, yeah, it's beautiful. I already can tell.
That all gets before the 36 months, right? The blends get added before the 36 months and the dosage is after.
So the blending, the dosage is added, yes, on the back end, like once the wine goes into bottle before it's aged in bottle.
Yeah, I'm struggling with it.
But yeah, there's a lot of freshness and precision with this guy. Raspberry, blood orange, white cherry as well.
Now but you mentioned a little bit of still wine
Yes.
for color.
You know,
There are other different ways to produce a rosé. Obviously, contact with the black skins will give you some color, or in this case, you have still wine.
Yeah,
Pinot
you
Noir.
still find, yeah, about 10%.
Seigneur method, right? Is that what they, with the bleeding of the still wine? Is that what?
Yeah,
Seigneur.
yeah. It is, you know, it's a way of doing rosé.
Right.
It's a common way of doing champagne rosé.
Okay.
and Champagne.
Yeah. And you said that's why with rosé you'll have a variety of. It can be a really pale pink like that, or it can be a deeper red color.
And if you remember what I just said a little bit before, is that when people make still wine from champagne, they also, just like a vintage, they only pick the best grapes to do this. So when you have a rosé, they have the best. They kept that best grapes of Pinot Noir. Usually it's Pinot Noir. Usually, and then you know they blend it with the wine. So that's also something I think to emphasize, you know, in the way of making the wine, because we don't, you know, it's
Yeah. So we're almost out of time. Any closing comments? Matthew, you want to?
drink more champagne.
All right. Warren.
No, I think we've had a really interesting representation of the different styles of champagne. I think on the walk around tasting, you know, look for a Blanc de Blanc. I mean, we have one from Colcombet that's almost Blanc de Blanc. It's 95% Chardonnay and a little bit of Pinot Noir. The Tête de Cuvée. It's a surprise tasting, so it's going to be secret. So ask me about that. And also, you know, be adventurous. I'm surprised, Frank. I mean, I love rosé champagne. It's probably my favorite. Drink rosé champagne. I mean, it's peanut. You know, it's spectacular.
Food champagne. A food wine.
Absolutely.
Rosé champagne. Lovely, isn't it? And age wise. This is, remember now. This is non-mallow, so it's got structure.
and it's still very well round,
Balanced,
it's
right.
balanced.
And closing comments, Alexandra?
The happy holidays.
That's very good.
Thank you guys
So-
for coming out.
Yeah, thank you all so much.
Thank you.